The mystery of the Yonaguni Monument is one of the most captivating enigmas resting beneath the sea, and from the very first moment of its discovery, it has challenged everything we know about human history and the power of nature. Imagine standing on the edge of an island at the farthest shore of Japan, gazing out at the endless Pacific Ocean, knowing that hidden beneath those waves lies a structure so large, so monumental, that it has raised questions no one has ever been able to answer with certainty. Whether a masterpiece carved by the forces of nature or the legacy of an ancient civilization lost to time, this place carries with it a story that invites both science and imagination into its depths. When divers first stumbled upon the submerged monument off the island of Yonaguni in 1986, the sight that awaited them was unlike anything they had prepared to see. Descending into clear, turquoise waters, they expected reefs, colorful fish, and the gentle sway of underwater currents, but instead they found themselves floating in the presence of massive, geometric terraces that rose from the seafloor in grand, symmetrical steps. Walls stood impossibly straight, corners appeared sharp and deliberate, and platforms stretched across the seabed as if designed by hands with purpose and intent. One diver recalled the haunting sensation of hovering before an underwater pyramid, and it is easy to imagine why such a sight sparked a storm of questions. The discovery was not broadcast immediately as world-shaking news, but word spread quickly among those who dared to dive the waters around Yonaguni. Here was something utterly strange, a place where science and story began to entwine in ways that could not easily be undone. Some said these were only rocks, the result of sandstone fractured by earthquakes and broken apart by waves over thousands of years. Others, however, saw signs of steps, platforms, roads, and perhaps even the echoes of a city long vanished beneath the sea. From that moment, the Yonaguni Monument became not just a diving site, but a doorway into one of the greatest mysteries in modern archaeology. The first step in understanding this mystery is to recognize the sheer scale of the monument itself. Stretched across an area more than a football field in length, and rising nearly 25 meters from the ocean floor, the formation immediately commands respect. Imagine standing underwater before a staircase that seems too precise to have emerged naturally, or swimming along walls that extend as though designed to shape open courtyards. Divers report feelings of awe, not simply because of the vast shapes around them, but because of how alien they seem in the natural world. In the tranquil murmur of underwater silence, the structure evokes the presence of something intentional, something greater than chance arrangement. Yet explanation has never come easily in this case, and that is part of what makes the Yonaguni Monument such an enduring subject of wonder. At once, it offers two powerful possibilities. On one side, it could be geological, a statement of nature's ability to design patterns that mimic architecture without any human touch at all. On the other side, it could be archaeological, evidence of human ingenuity stretching back far earlier than official timelines allow, suggesting civilizations that rose and fell before recorded history began. This tension between nature and humanity, between stone and story, sets the stage for the mystery that has drawn adventurers, scientists, and dreamers across the globe to Yonaguni. To picture the setting is to understand just how extraordinary it is. Yonaguni itself is part of the Okinawa Prefecture, a place known for rugged shorelines, coral reefs, and waters rich with marine life. On the surface, the island appears remote, even quiet, a sleepy outpost at the edge of Japan. But beneath its waves lies a hidden labyrinth, a stone world unseen unless one takes the leap to descend beneath the breakers. For centuries, fishermen sailed these waters with no knowledge of the formations waiting below, and even today, one can walk the beaches of Yonaguni unaware of the immense stone terraces just offshore. At the heart of the monument are terraces that resemble the steps of enormous stairways, each ledge dropping down like a staircase for giants. The smallest are wide enough for groups of people to stand easily side by side, while the largest extend into vast, flat expanses. On some platforms, sharp intersections mark corners at perfect right angles. Divers often describe the sensation of swimming across plazas and walkways, with corridors that seem to lead somewhere, even though they vanish into the seafloor with no clear destination. There is a strong impression of order here, and order is what teases the imagination into believing in human craftsmanship. Of course, skeptics are quick to point out that order in nature can emerge without human involvement. Sandstone, the dominant rock around Yonaguni, naturally fractures along horizontal and vertical planes. Combined with tectonic activity, which is common in Japan's seismically active region, such breakage can create patterns that resemble steps, walls, and terraces. Erosion from waves, currents, and storms might then sharpen these shapes, leaving behind angular blocks and terraces that trick the human mind into believing it has found a lost city. Yet even accepting this geological explanation does not diminish the visual power of what rests beneath the ocean. It only adds to its wonder. The debates began almost as soon as the site was first documented. Professor Masaroki Kimura, a marine geologist, became one of the monument's most vocal proponents, declaring that at least parts of it were undoubtedly man-made. He argued that certain features, such as what appear to be cylindrical holes, carved steps, and symmetrical faces, go far beyond what could reasonably be attributed to natural forces alone. He considered the possibility that ancient inhabitants of the Ryukyu Islands had shaped the natural formations into structures of ceremonial or practical use, suggesting the monument might even predate known Japanese history by thousands of years. Critics, however, maintained that Kimura allowed his interpretations to drift too deeply into speculation. For every apparent carving, they proposed a natural fracture, for every corridor a coincidence, for every platform a product of erosion and chance encounters of stone. Nevertheless, the tension between these views is not simply antagonistic, it is what has kept interest in Yonaguni alive for decades. Scientists disagree, but in their disagreement lies the vibrancy of the monument's story. If everyone accepted it as nothing more than rock, it might fade into obscurity. If everyone agreed it was a city built 10,000 years ago, the debate would end just as quickly. Instead, it lives somewhere between, an open-ended riddle that straddles the boundaries of myth and geology, legend and fact, creating a magnet for curiosity. One must also consider the voices outside of science, the divers, writers, and storytellers who keep Yonaguni awake in the imagination of the world. To many of them, what matters is not so much whether the monument was a city or a quirk of nature, but rather the feeling it inspires when seen firsthand. There is something deeply human in gazing upon ruins, imagined or real, and connecting them to our sense of time, memory, and wonder. In this way, the Yonaguni Monument serves as a mirror, reflecting not just stone formations, but the yearning of human beings to connect their small lifespans to something far greater, something eternal resting beneath the sea. As one drifts across the terraces, surrounded by the silent motion of water, it is possible to feel that connection to a deeper story waiting to be told. The monument whispers to divers not with sound, but with presence, and presence is often harder to dismiss than evidence. Here are stones that stand tall, steps that invite ascent, plazas that suggest congregation. Whether crafted by gods, humans, or simply tectonic forces, the monument feels alive in its stillness, as if keeping the secrets of ages long before written record. In this feeling lies the true allure of Yonaguni, and it is why, decades after its discovery, the mystery still grows rather than fades. The terraces beneath the waters of Yonaguni are perhaps the most astonishing aspect of the submerged monument, and it is within these tiered formations that the heart of the mystery resides. When divers first descended and lit their torches against the stone, they saw platforms rising one after another in gradual steps, the effect so symmetrical that it felt as though they were gazing at a pyramid carefully chiseled into the seabed. Each level seemed to lead upward toward a flattened summit, and the arrangement of these terraces haunted observers with the sense of architecture, human intention stitched into the fabric of rock. It is easy to imagine the awe a diver feels when drifting along one of these stair-like walls. The water is calm, the sound is reduced to the steady rhythm of bubbles, and before them lies a staircase large enough to carry a procession of people. Each block of stone aligns with its neighbor, edges crisp as though shaped by a master hand. If our ancestors had indeed raised stone temples or ceremonial complexes here, then the monument might once have towered above the surface, catching sunlight upon its tiers before finally giving in to the relentless advance of the ocean's rise. From a modern eye, such formations seem almost too perfect to be the work of natural erosion. Descending ledges create the illusion of intentionality, each platform following a geometric order that defies randomness. Sharp 90-degree angles appear at the corners of walls, where one terrace meets another. These lines feel deliberate, their organization awakening the sense that patterns are at play. Geometry speaks the language of design, and when the underwater world echoes that language, human instinct cannot help but wonder who or what once used this place. Yet the argument remains divided, for geology provides a counter-narrative just as compelling. Sandstone fractures naturally along horizontal bonds, a trait known as bedding plane splitting. Add earthquakes so common in the volatile region of Okinawa and vertical cracks appear, producing large blocks with rectangular outlines. Over centuries, currents sweep through and waves strike relentlessly, wearing edges but leaving behind overall shapes that astonish us with their order. In this telling, the terraces are the cumulative product of simple natural laws, blind processes that coincidentally create the impression of steps ascending into secrecy. Divers often pause upon the largest terrace, a broad platform extending almost 20 meters, open and solemn beneath its covering of blue water. Some describe the sensation as hovering above a kind of ceremonial plaza, a central gathering place where one could imagine hundreds standing in ancient ritual. Others see merely a flat stone sheet, no different from countless other seafloor formations found throughout island chains. Perspective itself becomes part of the story, shaping not the stone but the meaning we attach to it. What we see is not only rock, it is also our own desire to decode it, to shape it into civilization or leave it as untouched geology. In certain areas, the stone terraces are bordered by what look like walls. These edges rise steeply upward, with vertical faces that tower above divers, their sharpness again provoking questions of design. Within these sheer cliffs, small ledges protrude, almost like seats or benches carved into the side of the monument. To a believer in ancient builders, these features look like the remains of a forgotten amphitheater beneath the sea, a place where people may once have gathered to look outward toward the ocean horizon. To skeptics, they are simply outcrops, joint lines in the rock, formations no more intentional than cracks upon a mountain face. Both perspectives coexist, stubbornly inseparable, enticing explorers to rethink the threshold between natural wonder and human artifact. Perhaps the most striking quality of the terraces is the way they layer one upon another, stacked with precision like steps toward an unseen destination. Unlike the jagged chaos usually associated with coastal erosion, these levels feel calm, regular, as if arranged with an architectural eye. Divers find themselves not just swimming across a raw seascape but moving through a space that feels designed, like rooms without ceilings or corridors leading to chambers. There is a haunting familiarity in such arrangements, as though the sea itself has preserved the echo of human order long after its builders vanished. Some believe that if humans had a role, their intervention may not have been to build the monument from nothing but to enhance what nature had already provided. Imagine a rocky outcrop thrust upward by tectonic activity, its plains fractured into flat terraces. Early inhabitants of the islands, tens of thousands of years ago, might have found such a place and chosen to carve it, shaping natural steps into broader plazas, connecting levels with stairways, and carving markers into stone faces. If so, the monument represents a collaboration between Earth and humanity, where nature laid the bones and ancient builders gave it form. This possibility gives the site its most intriguing duality, standing halfway between natural wonder and human achievement. Swimming across these terraces today, one feels a strange relationship to time itself. The ocean envelops everything in slow rhythm, currents passing softly, fish darting across ledges, sunlight scattering in silver ribbons above. Against such tranquility, the weight of deep history presses forward. Even if untouched by human tool, this formation has rested here as the sea rose to cover it, carrying with it the memory of landscapes long drowned with the melting of ice ages. If people once walked upon these stones, the terraces hold fragments of a forgotten world, a snapshot of a coastline swallowed by the shifting breath of Earth's climate. The most debated feature among the terraces is a giant rectangular platform often referred to as the Grand Stairway. Rising like a pyramid from the seafloor, it extends in steps that are almost theatrical in scale, narrowing as they ascend toward a flattened top. At different depths, smaller ledges appear as if marking levels of ascent for climbers, giving the impression of a staircase for a temple, perhaps a ceremonial approach toward a summit. Such symmetry echoes pyramidal shapes found in human cultures across the globe from Egypt to Mesoamerica, raising tantalizing questions about the human tendency to build in tiers that resemble mountains rising toward the sky. Could it be coincidence? Could the ocean floor be carrying the reflection of an ancient vision lost to time? Yet, as compelling as such thoughts are, geologists remain steadfast in grounding the monument's story in the pressure of stone and the motion of earth. The terraces align, they argue, because fault lines have imposed their geometry upon the rock. Shifting plates tear stone into blocks and slabs, producing the clean horizontal and vertical orientations that so easily echo architecture. Water then sculpts, smoothing surfaces, accentuating lines, and creating areas where divers perceive intention. Human beings, attuned to recognizing patterns, may interpret randomness as purpose, turning geology into ghostly architecture in the imagination. Psychologists even note how our minds are wired to find order and assign meaning, whether in clouds, tree bark, or in the submerged ridges of Yonaguni. One cannot escape, however, the sensation that if these terraces stood above the surface, exposed to sunlight, we would treat them differently. On land, monumental stone steps spanning such vast scales might be embraced immediately as archaeology, cordoned off as heritage, reconstructed in drawings as centers of lost cultures. Underwater, blurred by currents and seen only in fleeting moments of a diver's torch, they remain doubtful, lingering between categories, forever open to question. Perhaps it is this uncertainty that gives the terraces so much power, allowing them to embody the unexplainable, existing neither as relics we can confirm nor as accidents we can dismiss. Even today, when divers approach the terraces during certain seasons, strong currents make their exploration perilous. The sea guards its secret fiercely, allowing only the skilled and the brave to drift along the monumental ledges. Those who succeed speak often of the silence that enfolds them. There are no crowds, no markers, no interpretation signs, only water, stone, and the weight of history, real or imagined. Suspended in this intermediary world, they sense the terraces not only as structures but as stories, stories that rise from the seabed into the imagination of anyone who gazes long enough. For some, this creates a deep feeling of human connection. The terraces suggest a world that once existed before our modern civilizations, a time when humanity may have lived in closer union with the ocean before being overwhelmed by rising seas. For others, the terraces remind us of the sheer artistry of nature, how blind forces sculpt beauty that rivals, and sometimes surpasses, human aspirations. To meditate upon the terraces of Yonaguni is to stand within this duality, unable to claim certainty but hypnotized by the possibility. When light filters through the surface and touches the uppermost terrace, there is a moment when the monument glows faintly golden, catching sunlight in shimmering patterns. Divers hovering then may feel as though the sea itself is illuminating an altar, a place of reverence in the drowned world. Whether for nature's grandeur or for the memory of an ancient people, reverence feels appropriate, for what lies here is not ordinary, and ordinary explanations fail to fully capture its mystery. What persists, above all, is the pull these terraces create, the pull toward curiosity, toward wonder, and toward the belief that some places exist not to be resolved, but to remind us of how vast our unknowns remain. Across the terraces of Yonaguni, where stone steps rise and fall in quiet procession beneath the currents, a deeper question begins to stir. If this monument bears any mark of human design, then who could have built it, and what civilization might it belong to? The ocean conceals more than stone, it conceals the silence of history, the layers of time where written words cannot reach. If humanity did once carve, shape, or inhabit this site, it would mean that somewhere in the forgotten corridors of the Pacific world, an advanced culture thrived when the rest of human history still lived in its infancy. This idea pulls us far beyond geology and into the realm of archaeology, into the imagination where civilizations rise and vanish long before the records of known empires. To look upon the Yonaguni Monument with the mind of a believer is to see its steps as ceremonial, its walls as civic foundations, its plazas as the reminders of a people who once gathered in ritual beneath an open sky. The ocean floor becomes not lifeless stone, but instead the ruins of a drowned world, calling us to ask whether the old myths of lost continents were not myths at all, but fragments of truth preserved in legend. In the Pacific, stories of vanished lands echo across islands like whispers against waves. There are legends of Lemuria, said to have stretched across the ocean, peopled by beings who built cities with knowledge beyond our comprehension. There are dreams of Mu, an ancient kingdom described as vast and powerful, lost to a great flood or sudden upheaval. When divers gaze upon the terraces of Yonaguni, these stories return with renewed life, as if the ocean itself is pointing toward memory rather than imagination. Could this monument be a trace of such a world, one which textbooks deny but stories preserve? Even within Japan, echoes of lost lands emerge in myth. Tales from the Ryukyu Islands speak of kingdoms that sank beneath the sea, kingdoms punished or cleansed by water's overwhelming force. Across cultures, flood myths are nearly universal, from Mesopotamian tablets to biblical stories, from indigenous myths of the Americas to Aboriginal tales of Australia. Great deluges dominate the earliest layers of human storytelling. The Yonaguni Monument, resting far below the waves, fits like a stone into that larger mosaic of memory, one more reminder that seas have risen, lands have drowned, and perhaps lives and civilizations have been swept away with them. Science offers its own sobering timeline. Throughout the last ice age, sea levels stood much lower than they do today, exposing vast parts of the continental shelves now hidden beneath hundreds of feet of water. Around 10,000 years ago, as ice sheets melted and oceans rose, coastlines redrew themselves across the world. If humanity had built settlements near those ancient coasts, then much of their handiwork would now lie concealed beneath the waves. The terraces of Yonaguni occupy such a position, hinting that if indeed they were enhanced by human hand, they might belong to an era when seas had not yet overwhelmed the stone. Archaeologists who support this possibility point to features within the monument that seem too unusual to dismiss. They note the appearance of channels that resemble roads, of broad stone arrangements suggestive of plazas, of depressions that look like post holes or markers. One striking aspect near the terraces is a flat expanse that some have claimed to be a kind of ceremonial stage, perhaps once used for assemblies or rituals. To swim across such a place, with fish circling above and light flickering gently over stone, is to imagine people long ago standing there, looking outward to an ocean horizon that swallowed their world. The scale of this speculation is staggering. If the monument was built or shaped 10,000 years ago, it would predate the rise of ancient Egypt, Sumer, or the Indus Valley. Humanity at that time is believed to have been living in small, scattered groups, more hunter-gatherer than empire-builder. To accept Yonaguni as man-made would mean rewriting the story of civilization, pushing back the dawn of organized societies by several millennia, and acknowledging that advanced building cultures may have existed in isolation, their traces erased by floods, earthquakes, and the endless tides of time. Skeptics, of course, remind us that the human eye and human mind are storytellers too eager to impose order. They argue that myths of Lemuria or Mu arose not from memory but from imagination, projecting grand civilizations into the past to satisfy our desire for origins. Geologists, confident in their analysis, urge that the terraces are textbook examples of natural fracture patterns. They warn against romanticizing the ocean floor, cautioning that once one sees spares or roads in random rock, one can see cities everywhere. Yet even within skepticism lies acknowledgement. The power of Yonaguni stems not only from what it is, but from what it suggests, from the human hunger to ask more than stone will answer. As divers enter the spaces between terraces, the resemblance to corridors or streets amplifies this sense of lost urbanity. Narrow channels guide their path like alleyways through a small city. Open expanses widen like courtyards where markets might have gathered. Corners emerge as if designed to direct movement, to give orientation to a settlement long claimed by waves. In the silence, where all is filtered through the blue lens of seawater, imagination breathes through every angle, turning rock into ruins. Whether truth or mirage, the monument gains its life from this dialogue between form and perception. Ancient Pacific cultures leave little trace compared to the monumental ruins of the Old World. The history of the Pacific is scattered in oral tradition, in voyaging canoes, in stone markers carried across island chains. If ever there was a people who shaped Yonaguni, their voices are gone, their memory preserved only in the seabed's strange order. Perhaps they were seafarers who built with stone to honor the ocean that gave them passage, or astronomers who marked the rising sun as it aligned with terraces in days before the flood. Some researchers have wondered if the monument could have served as an ancient observatory, its angles guiding eyes to celestial events. Others imagine it as a fortress, protective steps guarding a society endangered by enemies or by sea. The Pacific Ocean itself lends weight to such visions. It is vast beyond imagination, home to countless islands scattered like stepping stones across its face. For thousands of years, humans mastered navigation here, charting stars and currents when the rest of the world doubted such feats possible. Against such a backdrop, the idea that a culture once rose, developed stone architecture, and vanished beneath rising seas does not feel impossible. History is filled with disappearances, cities buried under ash at Vesuvius, towns drowned in lakes after damming, empires turned to ruin swallowed in jungle. Why not also a city drowned quietly in the Pacific, its voice preserved only in terraces of stone? The feeling deepens when considering that the monument lies at the edge of what some have called the Pacific Ring of Fire, a region scarred by earthquakes and volcanism. Entire islands rise from these forces and vanish through them. Land is created and unmade here with violence and silence alike. Against such instability, a culture could have easily built upon stone, thrived for generations, and then lost everything in an instant, leaving only the fractured whispers we now struggle to interpret. What the sea reveals of Yonaguni may be only a fragment of a greater whole, the remnant of a city once sprawling across now drowned landscapes. We can never ignore the allure of myths that circle the site. The story of Mu, told in the 19th century, described a mighty Pacific continent destroyed in a cataclysm. Though dismissed by mainstream historians as invention, the legend echoes with familiarity when divers swim Yonaguni's terraces. Across oceans, the story of Atlantis has carried the same weight, the tale of a great land consumed by sea. These legends spread not because they are proven, but because they resonate with something we sense in the depths, a recognition that water has covered more than we remember, and that civilizations may vanish more easily than we accept. The monument of Yonaguni is fuel for that resonance, a tangible reminder that some myths feel less like invention and more like memory distorted through time. And yet through all of this, silence remains the truest witness. The stones do not confirm nor deny, they simply hold their shape beneath the endless tide. Geological patterns can explain them, myths can drape them in stories, divers can trace them with questioning hands, but the formation itself cares nothing for answers. It stands, unmoving, allowing waves to pass over it century after century, bearing the patience of a truth too deep to surface easily. That is perhaps why the monument has power, for it resists conclusion. Whether natural or crafted, it invites us to dwell in the space between knowledge and wonder, the space where human imagination grows its tallest. Here in the terraces of Yonaguni, science and myth intertwine. One path sees only sandstone shaped by earthquakes and erosion. Another path sees the ruins of a forgotten world, its people long vanished, remembered only in terrace and step. Both paths converge in the ocean's embrace, where divers drift through shadows that belong to neither certainty nor dream. And while scholars continue their debate, the monument continues its silence, continuing to cast its spell upon all who dare to look upon it. The story of the Yonaguni Monument inevitably turns from mythic tales of lost civilizations toward the solid reasoning of geology. For every diver who marvels at the haunting symmetry of the terraces, a geologist offers a sober reminder that the Earth itself is capable of shaping wonders without human intervention. The ocean floor is not a passive stage but a restless theater of force, continuously shifting, fracturing, colliding, and eroding. In such a world of upheaval, geometric shapes may arise naturally, sculpted not by human ambition but by pressure, fault lines, and an elemental patience that spans millennia. Those who approach Yonaguni from this geological lens begin with sandstone, the very rock that composes the monument's grand formation. Sandstone is known to fracture along natural planes of weakness, creating straight edges, horizontal layers, and perpendicular joints that resemble walls and terraces. Overwhelming pressure from neighboring tectonic plates forces the stone to break in ways that mimic architectural precision. When time is added to the formula, centuries of waves striking, storms grinding, and currents polishing the rocks assume geometric outlines that can deceive the eye into reading them as man-made. To the trained geologist, the steps of Yonaguni are not signs of ancient builders, but textbook cases of natural fracture patterns revealed in dramatic form. From this perspective, the so-called pyramid is simply an exposed block of stone, fractured into tiers by vertical and horizontal joints. What looks like a ceremonial stairway is nothing more than the layering of sedimentary rock, split repeatedly at predictable intervals. The currents that sweep across Yonaguni accentuate these patterns, stripping away softer material and leaving behind sharp edges. To human eyes accustomed to associating right angles with architecture, these edges stand out as signs of intention. But in truth, geologists insist, nature deals these shapes on many coastlines, making Yonaguni a wonder of geology rather than of archaeology. One of the frequent comparisons invoked by geologists is the example of Giant S Causeway in Northern Ireland, where vast hexagonal columns of basalt form natural pavements that appear almost impossibly geometric. No human hand carved them, they emerged when lava cooled and cracked into uniform patterns. Another comparison is the basalt cliffs of Iceland or the stepped rock formations in the American Southwest, where erosion sculpts broad staircases rising toward desert plateaus. These examples remind us that nature often creates forms we mistake for deliberate design, and the ocean floor around Yonaguni may be no different. The monument's beauty, therefore, lies not in its mystery alone, but in the demonstration of Earth's own artistry. Yet the geological case is more than visual resemblance. Detailed studies of the rock itself offer grounding for this argument. Samples from the monument show consistent sedimentary layering, with no evidence of different stones having been transported or fitted together. Unlike the giant blocks of Egyptian pyramids or the fitted stones of Incan walls, the rock at Yonaguni is continuous bedrock, still connected to the island's geological base. There are no seams filled with mortar, no chisel marks, no signs of cutting or polishing beyond what currents could provide. For many specialists, these clues confirm the monument as a natural structure, misinterpreted only because of its overwhelming scale and suggestive geometry. But the geological explanation does not rob the sight of its wonder. On the contrary, accepting Yonaguni as a natural masterpiece reveals the raw power of Earth's forces. To stand in its presence is to confront the creativity of tectonics and erosion, forces that rival human architecture in their capacity for order. Consider the energy that split these stones, the quakes that jolted them into sharp outlines, the waves that sculpted them over countless ages. In that view, Yonaguni becomes not the handiwork of a forgotten people, but a geologic cathedral raised by the marriage of pressure and water, a temple not of gods but of the earth itself. This interpretation also ties Yonaguni to its surrounding environment, a region defined by seismic restlessness. The Okinawa and Ryukyu arcs sit along the margins of colliding plates, making earthquakes here a natural constant. The seabed has risen and sunk repeatedly across ages, exposing and submerging coastlines in cycles. Such shifting landscapes provide the perfect conditions for the rise of formations that blend order with chaos. When divers speak of steps and platforms, geologists hear only the echoes of tectonic forces, a language written in stone long before humans appeared on the scene. For visitors seeking certainty, such arguments can be grounding. They allow us to see the monument not as contradiction but as continuity, an outcome of natural laws that operate with majestic simplicity. Yet there remains something tantalizing even within the geological frame. The resemblance to architecture is so compelling that even geologists often confess that the monument's illusion is extraordinary. While they stand firm that fractures and erosion are sufficient explanation, they acknowledge how rare it is for nature to arrange itself in so monumental a fashion. Yonaguni thus stands as a prime example of how geology can impersonate human design so effectively that entire narratives unfold from the illusion. The geological lens also offers a humbler reminder of how human perception works. Faced with an overwhelming presence of stone, our brains are trained to seek patterns, to connect lines, to interpret coincidence as intent. It is the same psychological tendency that leads us to see animals in the shapes of clouds or faces formed in mountain cliffs. At Yonaguni, the same instinct runs deeper, fueled by the vastness of the ocean and the hunger for stories of civilizations beyond memory. The rock does not lie, but the mind reads poetry into its silence, turning fracture into stairs, erosion into architecture, and coincidence into council halls. This is not to dismiss the possibility of human involvement. Some geologists concede that while the framework is entirely natural, there is room for the suggestion that ancient peoples may have enhanced certain features. They may have cleared debris, carved minor steps, or used the terraces as platforms without fundamentally reshaping their natural order. This hybrid view keeps alive the possibility of cultural interaction with the site while upholding geology as the dominant force behind its form. In such a telling, humanity and nature are not in opposition but intertwined, one building upon what the other had already begun. The inevitability of the geological view is that it situates Yonaguni within a global pattern of awe-inspiring natural formations. Around the world, rocks have taken forms so architectural they bear names like castles, cathedrals, temples, and palaces. Nature, in its endless patience, becomes the world's first and greatest builder, crafting wonders that inspire reverence before humankind ever picked up a tool. At Yonaguni, this same artistry is amplified by submersion, hidden in the mystery of water, so that its discovery feels like a secret unearthed, even if it is only a secret written by Earth itself. When one allows the geological story to unfold fully, the monument becomes a meditation on time almost too vast to fathom. Imagine the layers of sandstone being laid across ages, grains packed together under the weight of prehistoric oceans. Imagine the fractures forming when continents shifted, driven by the grinding of tectonic plates. Imagine waves striking again and again, sculpting corners, sharpening walls, and erasing edges until a pyramid emerged in accidental perfection. The monument is nothing more than a stone record of these processes, yet everything within its grandeur suggests meaning far beyond stone. Still, for every conclusion, an echo of doubt remains. The sheer magnitude of the structure, the clarity of its angles, the presence of what seem to be roads, steps, and plazas. These elements challenge the simplicity of the geological case. For the lay observer, it is hard to stand before Yonaguni and content oneself with explanations of joints and planes. The symbolism is too strong, the resonance with human architecture too undeniable. And so, even as geology explains, the mystery lingers, for the heart of Yonaguni lies not just in what science concludes, but in how experience resists being reduced to fact alone. In this way, Yonaguni is a monument not only of stone but of interpretation. Geology insists upon one truth, observation tempts toward another, and myth fills the spaces in between. Whether formed by human hands or shaped in silence by the earth, it carries the same haunting weight when seen beneath the sea. It reminds us that the search for answers is itself part of the experience, that the longing for certainty is woven into the awe that sights like this inspire. And whether we affirm nature or civilization, Yonaguni remains what it has always been, a wonder, steady and mysterious, waiting in quiet beneath the endless ocean tide. From the moment the first divers captured images of the stone terraces, a new wave of speculation began to ripple not only through the waters of Yonaguni but through the wider world of archaeology. If geology explained the monument as a natural creation, archaeologists and historians asked whether humans might have left their mark upon it nonetheless. Every corner, every ledge, every suspiciously straight alignment of rock seemed to whisper the possibility of deliberate human shaping. Long before laboratories and universities debated the evidence, the monument itself spoke to the intuition of those who beheld it. This does not look like accident, this feels like intention. What fuels this intuition is not a single detail but a collection of them. To swim along the great stair-like pyramid, to pass corridors that appear orderly, to stand upon plazas that feel like the foundations of meeting grounds, all combine to create the sense of design. Archaeologists who take this view argue that even if nature provided the foundation, ancient humans might have carved and modified what already existed. Nature may fracture stone into blocks, but sharp steps, platforms, and symmetrical faces are difficult to explain away entirely. This hybrid perspective that the monument is both natural and cultural satisfies a longing to bridge geology's explanation and the human desire for forgotten history. Among the most vocal advocates of this perspective has been Professor Masaroki Kimura, a marine geologist from Japan who studied the site for years. Kimura insisted that certain features, such as what resemble staircases, paved streets, and even carvings, could not be dismissed. He mapped the monument, identifying areas he described as temples, castles, and ceremonial platforms. He even suggested that some formations aligned with the cardinal directions, evoking comparisons with ancient sacred sites worldwide. For him, Yonaguni was not merely a marvel of stone but the ruins of an ancient city erased by the sea. His map circulated widely, sparking imagination throughout Japan and globally, drawing dozens of researchers, divers, and storytellers into the waters around Yonaguni. Critics challenged Kimura, calling his identification speculative. What Kimura saw as post holes were, they argued, random depressions. What he claimed as stairways were, geologically, no more than plains of eroded sandstone. A ceremonial plaza, skeptics pointed out, was indistinguishable from a flat natural terrace. Yet even as they rejected his claims, they acknowledged the monument remained compelling. Scientific caution required dismissal of far-reaching conclusions without solid evidence, but the tantalizing shapes of Yonaguni ensured the debate never faded. The very lack of certainty kept both sides alive, the stage set for endless oscillation between city and stone. As time passed, other researchers added their voices. Some divers documented what they thought were engravings or carved symbols upon certain surfaces of the monument. Photographs circulated showing lines etched into rock that appeared too continuous and deliberate to be dismissed as cracks. One diver described swimming across what looked like a giant relief carving, its patterns obscured by centuries of growth but still hinting at deliberate design. Archaeologists tested these claims, often finding the images more persuasive to the imagination than to strict measurement. But the photographs continued to intrigue the public, feeding the sense that Yonaguni was more than geology alone. The possibility of lost architecture raised a profound question. If humans indeed carved or lived here, just how long ago could that have been? Archaeologists generally agree that much of Yonaguni has been submerged for thousands of years, likely since the end of the last ice age around 10,000 years ago. This timeline stunned those willing to imagine Yonaguni as artificial. 10,000 years ago predates the known rise of agriculture, predates the early cities of Mesopotamia, and stands millennia before the stone monuments of Egypt. To accept Yonaguni as a city would require rewriting civilization's prehistory, admitting cultures capable of large-scale stone construction existed untold ages earlier than believed. Certain features of the monument seem to invite such speculation. Divers point to the so-called Loop Road, a channel running through the site that resembles a purposefully cleared street. Others highlight a sheer wall whose smooth face looks chiseled rather than fractured. Some note the presence of near-perfect right-angled corners where walls meet floors, a geometry more at home in architecture than in chaos. Each feature on its own might be dismissed as accident, but together they form an entire tableau of suggestive order. It is this mosaic of details, not just one anomaly, that grips those who view Yonaguni as archaeological. However, the archaeological perspective faces immense challenges in proof. Evidence of human tools, pottery, or organic remains that could link the site to a culture has never been clearly recovered. Without such artifacts, the claim of human construction remains on uncertain ground. Critics argue that imagination fills the gaps photographs leave open, compelling divers to see what they wish to find. The ocean does not give up its secrets easily. Currents scatter remains, coral and silt bury surfaces, and every century erases further traces. To prove human involvement in a site so deeply submerged demands luck, persistence, and perhaps technologies not yet perfected. In spite of the lack of physical artifacts, the debate continues to flourish because the idea resonates so strongly with human imagination. We crave the story of lost civilizations, of sunken continents, of cities brought low by rising seas. Archaeologists, despite their cautious voices, cannot ignore that stone structures have been found worldwide that challenge simple timelines. At Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, massive stone temples dating back over 11,000 years were uncovered, proving that human societies capable of monumental building existed far earlier than once thought. If such culture arose in ancient Anatolia, some argue, why not also in the depths of the Pacific? The existence of Yonaguni beckons us to reconsider what we think we know about human ability and human reach. The counterpoint persists, of course. Critics warn that equating Yonaguni with Göbekli Tepe is premature, that a carved temple discovered underground is not the same as a possibly natural formation underwater. They stress the absence of inscriptions, carvings, or material culture at Yonaguni, relics that would confirm beyond doubt the human presence. But those who perceive Yonaguni as archaeological suggest patience, arguing that areas yet unexplored might conceal artifacts, or that centuries of submersion have stripped away all but stone. In this uncertainty, mystery lives on, and the monument continues to capture the tension between evidence and imagination. For divers who experience the site firsthand, the archaeological possibility often feels undeniable. They describe the monument as unfolding like a cityscape, leading their senses through avenues and into plazas, over stairways, and past towers of stone. The immense silence of the sea magnifies this impression, allowing each shadow and line to suggest purpose. Many come away convinced they have walked within the silent ruins of something extraordinary. Their testimonies, though not scientific, weave into the cultural narrative surrounding Yonaguni, encouraging others to journey there and experience the same haunting wonder. Even within Japan, the monument has grown into a source of cultural reflection. Some view it as evidence of a forgotten chapter of Japanese history, perhaps tied to the Jomon culture that thrived millennia ago. Others see it as a gateway to legends of submerged lands described in local folklore, a physical counterpart to myth preserved in oral traditions. This blending of archaeology, suspicion, and cultural memory creates an atmosphere where the monument cannot be simply dismissed. It matters not only as rock or ruin, but as a canvas where science, tradition, and belief paint their overlapping visions. The archaeological debate also raises deeper questions about what it means to define construction. Must every block be quarried and fitted into place to count? Or can the enhancement of a natural landscape carving steps into existing terraces, shaping walls into cleaner lines, directing spaces into routes also apply? Some argue that even minimal human modification, if proven, would be monumental, demonstrating that as early as 10,000 years ago, humans were capable of envisioning and altering landscapes at immense scale. The question is not simply natural or man-made, but whether the two can coexist within a single monument, fused across time into the shape we now inherit. As scientists debate, the world beyond academia continues to be moved by Yonaguni's mystery. Documentaries amplify the possibility of a lost city, writers interweave the monument into tales of Lemuria or Atlantis, and cultural enthusiasts celebrate the site as a wonder regardless of its classification. The monument, by existing in this liminal zone between geology and archaeology, has transcended strict categories. It has become a stage for human imagination, a place where debate itself is part of the story. To see Yonaguni is not to arrive at a conclusion but to join a dialogue echoing across decades, perhaps across centuries to come. In the end, the archaeological question lingers with no closure. Perhaps new evidence will one day emerge, preserved in some corner of stone or buried beneath sediment, proving human hands once shaped or used the monument. Or perhaps deeper study will confirm geology as the sole author of every terrace and ledge. Until then, Yonaguni marks the threshold between two worlds, the world of natural force and the world of human endeavor, entwined in a single formation. Whether ruin or rock, it keeps open a space where imagination may wonder, where science may question, and where the human spirit may reflect upon all that is lost beneath the tides of time. The possibility that the Yonaguni Monument could be over 10,000 years old stretches the imagination as far as the ocean itself. If the terraces, walls, and platforms truly predate the rise of known civilizations, then history as we tell it would suddenly unfold upon a different timeline, one in which human ingenuity reached monumental heights long before the accepted birth of agriculture or cities. To accept such an ancient age is to face the mystery of who these builders might have been, how they could have achieved such presence in stone, and why only fragments of their memory might remain silently preserved beneath the sea. The key to this question of time lies not within the carvings, since tools and inscriptions have yet to be found, but within the sea itself. During the last ice age, vast quantities of water were bound into glacier, and sea levels across the globe stood far lower than they do today. As the ice melted between 18,000 and 8,000 years ago, waters rose steadily, submerging coastlines and drowning shelf regions where early human settlements may have flourished. If Yonaguni's monument once stood upon dry land, it would have rested at a time when humans were already adaptive and resourceful, though mainstream archaeology holds they were still far from creating massive stone complexes. The terraces of Yonaguni are found at a depth where sea levels are believed to have stood in the late Pleistocene and early Holocene epochs. This means that if the structures were shaped or inhabited by humans, their use would have ceased around 8 to 10,000 years ago, when encroaching waves finally overwhelmed them. Such a date pushes human activity at Yonaguni far beyond the Neolithic Revolution, creating the unsettling suggestion of advanced activity before history says advanced cultures even began. This stretching of chronology provokes some researchers to reconsider the way we view history altogether, not as a neat ladder of progress, but as a branching, uneven web where some cultures may rise, achieve, and vanish without leaving written memory behind. If a civilization truly existed that long ago near Yonaguni, one immediate problem arises: we know so very little about the peoples of East Asia from those remote times. Archaeological evidence of the Jomon period in Japan begins closer to 14,000 years ago, with hunter-gatherer societies producing pottery that is considered among the oldest in the world. Yet pottery shards and small tools are very different from massive terrace structures carved into stone. How could these same people, or their ancestors, have had the organization to conceive, plan, and shape monuments at such scale? Some scientists answer by saying they could not have possessed that capability, which further strengthens the geological case. Others, however, argue that we underestimate what early cultures could achieve. The human story is punctuated by discoveries that force us to reconsider our assumptions. For years, archaeologists believed monumental architecture was impossible before farming. Then sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey proved otherwise, revealing enormous stone temples built by hunter-gatherers more than 11,000 years ago. That revelation shattered established timelines, showing that even without agriculture, humans of the deep past could organize collective labor, envision sacred architecture, and carve massive stones with skill. If one group could do this in the Near East, is it unreasonable to believe another group, upon a different continent, might have developed their own monumental expressions? Thus the monument of Yonaguni is not rejected outright, but weighed against the possibility that humanity's story is more complex than previously thought. The mysteries of sea level rise only deepen the allure. When seas advanced at the end of the Ice Age, enormous areas of land were submerged, forever concealing whatever may have stood there. Coastal communities, small villages, perhaps even centers of trade and ritual all drowned silently beneath rising tides. Across the world, underwater archaeologists have uncovered glimpses of such lost settlements, stone tools off the coasts of India, submerged ruins near Alexandria, and wooden artifacts preserved beneath European seas. The watery silence holds much, erasing detail but preserving suggestion. Yonaguni, within this broader context, might not be alone in its mystery but part of a global trend, the ocean's hidden archives, unlocked only when we dive into its blue halls. The projection of a 10,000-year age changes the stakes of the debate considerably. If the monument is entirely natural, then its age is the age of the rock, millions of years in the making, shaped into its current form by geological processes across eons. But if humans intervened, the time of intervention matters at least as much as the stone itself. The closer we edge toward 10,000 years ago, the more Yonaguni challenges the linearity of history. It becomes a candidate for a civilization that rose and fell when glacier still clung to northern lands, when great beasts still walked the earth, when most of humanity had not yet learned to plant seed and harvest crop. Such an idea is difficult for consensus to embrace, but it resonates with those who feel mainstream timelines remain incomplete. One of the great challenges in examining this ancient age lies in testing methods. Artifacts, when found, can be carbon dated. But Yonaguni offers almost no artifacts. Stone cannot reveal when it was cut, only when it was formed geologically. Without clear human marks, dating the monument relies largely upon reconstructing the history of global sea levels and comparing them with the present depth of the structure. From this, scientists estimate that human occupation, if it occurred, must have ended between 8 and 10,000 years ago. Yet without tools, pottery, or skeletons, the evidence remains circumstantial, making room for endless debate. And so, two interpretations diverge. To one group, this absence of cultural material implies that humans never used the site, that the terraces are purely geological, never touched by hand. To another group, the lack of artifacts is expected given the passage of time and the violence of ocean currents. 10,000 years is time enough for organic remains to vanish, for coral to crust over surfaces, for storms to erode delicate evidence. They argue that stone alone is durable enough to survive while other traces are inevitably lost. And so, the very lack of evidence can be turned into argument both for and against human occupation, reinforcing a debate that may never conclude. Beyond questions of tools and timelines, the monument inspires larger meditations about the rhythm of history itself. Civilizations rising and collapsing is not unusual. Every great culture eventually passes. Yet imagine civilization so ancient, so erased, that all that remains are the stones upon which they stood. If Yonaguni belongs to such an epoch, then we are not merely inheritors of known history but of countless hidden histories, buried beneath earth, jungles, and especially seas. The vast stretches of the continental shelf, once dry land, could conceal hundreds of forgotten sites equal in scale to Yonaguni, their presence yet to be touched by diver or camera. The weight of time transforms Yonaguni into a monument not only of mystery but of possibility. It invites us to reconsider the arrogance of believing we hold a complete account of humanity's past. 10,000 years is not so long when placed against the millions of years rock has existed, but within human terms, it contains almost everything. To suggest that monuments older than Egypt might exist is to destabilize the story we tell about how and when human culture advanced. It reminds us that ignorance is vast, that history is not a strict record but a narrow window through which we see only fragments. Some researchers expand this argument further, proposing that we may regularly underestimate the technological and social capacity of early hunter-gatherer societies. Perhaps their mobility and adaptability made them even more capable of organizing labor and engaging in massive communal projects, especially those tied to celestial observation or religious ritual. The monument, if human, may not have been meant for survival or farming but for spirituality, aligning stone and sky, earth and sea. In this vision, Yonaguni becomes less a city than an ancient shrine, a place where humanity searched for meaning against the immensity of nature, carving terraces not for habitation but for reverence. Still, doubt persists. The more extraordinary the claim, the more extraordinary the evidence it demands, and Yonaguni does not yet offer such evidence. Without inscriptions, without tools carved from stone or metal, without hearths or pottery scattered nearby, the claim of a civilization 10,000 years old remains speculative. What makes Yonaguni so haunting is precisely this interplay between potential and absence, the way it tempts us with tantalizing features while withholding the one undeniable proof archaeologists crave. It is a puzzle half assembled, pieces missing, but the outline of possibility enough to capture the imagination of millions. Diving deeper into this question of age, one must also face the instability of the Earth itself. This is not a fixed landscape but a restless one, battered by earthquakes, typhoons, and shifting plates. Over 10,000 years, terrain fractures, collapses, and erodes. Could what look like carved steps simply be collapses shaped by repeated shocks? Could platforms that appear deliberate be coincidental alignments of fractured stone? Perhaps. But once again, the resemblance to human architecture nags at the imagination, blurring the line between coincidence and craftsmanship until no certainty seems solid enough to silence either side. In the quiet of the monument's terraces, suspended in shadow and light, the debate of its age becomes almost irrelevant to the one who hovers before it. Whether human-built 10,000 years ago or naturally shaped across deep time, the monument has endurance. It has survived rising seas, rushing currents, countless storms. It has beckoned divers to dream of cities drowned and civilizations erased. In speaking of its age, we also speak of our desire to situate ourselves in time, to know who we are by knowing who came before, and how long ago memory may stretch. Yonaguni becomes less a physical sight and more a mirror to our own yearning for permanence within impermanence. And so we continue to speak of the 10,000-year question. We measure stone, we compare geology, we speculate upon myth, but what we truly measure is the extent of our uncertainty. We are reminded that history, as told in books, is not final. It is provisional, revised when sites like Yonaguni rise from obscurity to challenge what we thought impossible. 10,000 years ago, people may or may not have carved these terraces, but the question itself is transformative. It reshapes the limits of our imagination, reminding us that beneath the seas, more questions wait, heavy with stone, silent with mystery, patient as the centuries themselves. Legends often survive where written records fail, and around the islands near Yonaguni, myths rise like echoes from beneath the sea. Long before divers first discovered the terraces, the people of Okinawa and the Ryukyu chain carried stories of kingdoms swallowed by the ocean, of islands lost in great floods, of ancestors who spoke of lands now vanished where the horizon ends. When confronted with the submerged monument, these tales seem less like imagination and more like fragmented memory, whispers passed down through generations to remind people that what lies beneath the sea once stood in the open air. Across cultures, water occupies the role of destroyer and renewal. It takes away life but also purifies, it erases but also preserves. In Okinawan folklore, as in so many other traditions, we find stories of gods punishing arrogance with storms, of entire villages swept beneath waves, of sacred places resting deep beneath the tides. To gaze upon the Yonaguni Monument is to feel these myths pressing close, as if the stones themselves were the skeletal remains of such fables, silent testaments to a catastrophe or a transformation that people still struggle to articulate. The Ryukyu Islands, scattered like stepping stones between Japan and Taiwan, have always been steeped in lore. Ancient songs tell of spirits of the sea, guardians that both protect and destroy, entities that carry the power to raise land and sink it beneath water. Some variations of oral tradition speak of a sprawling kingdom that flourished with its own rituals and temples before it was consumed by seawater. When divers today swim across what looks like vast plazas and stepped altars, it is not difficult to imagine that these legends may have emerged from real landscapes, dimly remembered but never fully explained. Stories of submerged lands are not unique to Japan. They appear across the Pacific, Hawaiian chants of Kanaloa's drowned islands, tales from Polynesia of ancestral homelands lost to the sea, echoes from Micronesia of stone cities overtaken by water. The most famous of all is Atlantis, the fabled island described by Plato as a powerful civilization destroyed in a single day and night of catastrophe. The resonance between these legends is striking, for they converge upon one theme: humanity has lived upon shifting shores, and water has often claimed what people once shaped. In this global chorus, Yonaguni stands like a verse of its own song, proof that the sea guards secrets older than history. Within Okinawan culture, the sea itself is seen as a boundary between the human world and the world of the gods. Sacred sites, often called utaki, were built upon cliffs overlooking the water, places where people would pray to the horizon, imagining their petitions carried across waves to the realms beyond. Some scholars suggest that if Yonaguni held ceremonial significance, it may have been part of this cosmology, a shrine or temple built near the water's edge to mediate between humans and the divine. As the sea rose, such a shrine might have been swallowed, preserved not in legend alone but in stone still resting beneath. Geological evidence of flooding worldwide helps explain why myths of sinking lands are nearly universal. As glacier retreated, ancient coastlines disappeared. Villagers who depended upon these shores would have witnessed rivers swelling, lowlands drowning, and islands slowly vanishing, a process not instantaneous but devastating all the same. Oral storytelling preserved the trauma across centuries, transforming it into cautionary myth. The tale of a land drowned always carries grief, but also warning and remembrance. Yonaguni's terraces synchronize with that global narrative, as though the monument itself is a physical echo of humanity's deepest waterbound fears. For the people of the Ryukyu Islands, the sea is also identity. Fishing, navigation, sailing all defined their way of life since time began. To lose land to the sea was not only tragedy but transformation, shaping the cultural imagination for millennia. When such people speak of drowned kingdoms, they are describing not only the physical landscape but a psychological one, the feeling of the sea as both benefactor and thief, offering sustenance while reclaiming entire worlds. Yonaguni's presence reinforces that dialogue. It is part of the mythology even if science cannot confirm the myth's history. Legends also nourish the collective fascination with hidden truths. To believe that beneath one's home waters lies the memory of an ancient people is to carry pride and/or in equal measure. Local divers have often described Yonaguni not merely as a curiosity but as a sacred site, a place where one feels connected to both ancestors and the deep time of the earth. When myths and monuments converge, reverence follows naturally, and Yonaguni has become such a convergence, a focal point where folklore touches stone. Some scholars argue that myths often adapt to landscape, that when unusual formations are seen, stories emerge to explain them. In this reading, the monument did not inspire myths of lost kingdoms because it was once truly a kingdom, but because ancient fishermen glimpsed its angles during shallow water periods, interpreting it as remnants of gods or ancestors. Over time, legends grew, expanding into full stories of submerged palaces and vanished peoples. But others suggest the opposite. that the stories themselves preserve truth, remembering lands that really did exist before floods transformed the shore. In the absence of certainty, both interpretations remain alive, side by side, like waves chasing one another endlessly onto the sand. In nearby traditions, there are also flood heroes, figures who survive cataclysm to rebuild life anew. These echoes mirror figures from biblical Noah to Mesopotamian Utnapishtim, reinforcing the universal story that when waters rise, humanity either perishes or begins again. If the Yonaguni Monument is indeed an ancient site overwhelmed by seas, then its very stones embody the same story: catastrophe followed by survival, erasure balanced by memory. For those who listen carefully, it tells a myth already embedded in virtually every human tradition that nothing stands forever against the water. Scientists reluctant to accept myth as evidence nonetheless acknowledge its importance. Legends encode the ways ancient people understood their world, often in reference to real natural events. Oral traditions preserved across centuries may seem exaggerated, but echoes of volcanoes, earthquakes, and floods persist within them. That the Ryukyu people speak of drowned lands may not prove an ancient kingdom, but it does reflect a living awareness of rising seas and shifting shorelines. Thus, the legends carry value, not as literal proof but as cultural knowledge passed forward in story form. The power of legend is not in proof but in resonance. When modern divers swim over a plaza that looks deliberate, the myth of a drowned kingdom flickers vividly in their minds, reinforcing what the senses already suggest. The myth fuels the interpretation of stone, while the stone fuels the interpretation of myth. Together they form a feedback loop that makes Yonaguni unforgettable. To listen to the waves breaking against the shore of the island above is to wonder if they mask the cries of those who once lost their homes below, voices transformed into the rhythm of tide. What makes Yonaguni unusual is how firmly it occupies this threshold between science and story. Geologists speak from processes of fracture and erosion, archaeologists peer toward possibility, while local traditions weave the story of a kingdom sunken beneath the sea. None of these perspectives erase the others. In fact, they all persist, harmonizing like instruments playing the same melody in different tones. The monument does not submit to one explanation, but rather invites every interpretation to add its own texture to the mystery. Within this blending lies the symbolic power of the site. Yonaguni is not only a geological structure, nor only a debated ruin. It is also a mythscape, where human storytelling, environmental memory, and physical stone intertwine. To explore it is to be drawn not just into scientific discussions but into the dreams of cultures who believed in lands beneath the sea. It is this dreamlike quality that makes the monument so well suited for quiet contemplation. As you listen, you drift not only through water but through time, caught between folklore and geology, suspended in a current of unanswerable wonder. Ultimately, when legends of lost kingdoms are told in relation to Yonaguni, they are not only about ancient kings and temples, they are mirrors of the human relationship to the ocean. The sea gives, and the sea takes, and what it hides leaves stories behind. Yonaguni is one such story, written in waves, carved in stone, repeated in voices around fire circles, retold now beneath the gaze of divers with cameras. It is a reminder that myths endure precisely because they touch something real, even if that reality rests not in stone palaces but in the shared human need to explain the power of water, and to remember what it has claimed. And so, as one floats across the terraces, with coral clinging to stone and currents brushing against the body, the legends seem to come alive. You can almost hear the voices of storytellers who once sat on beaches, telling their children of kingdoms beneath the ocean. You can almost imagine ancestors looking out from cliffs, pointing to the horizon and whispering of lands that once were, warning of floods that could come again. The monument does not confirm these legends, nor does it deny them. It simply holds the silence where stories dwell, waiting for each listener to decide whether they hear myth or memory woven into its shape. Exploration of the Yonaguni Monument did not end with its discovery in the 1980s. Rather, its mystery only grew as divers, researchers, photographers, and adventurers returned again and again, each time hoping the stones might reveal a little more of their story. What began as a startling find by local divers soon transformed into a point of international fascination. The terraces and platforms beneath the sea started attracting not just geologists and archaeologists, but also television crews, documentary filmmakers, and travelers with curiosity too strong to resist. The monument gradually became more than an underwater formation. It became a living stage where science, speculation, and wonder constantly perform. The island of Yonaguni itself has since become a quiet hub for those seeking an encounter with the site. Tucked away at the farthest edge of Japan's Okinawa Prefecture, Yonaguni is remote, a place difficult to reach and often buffeted by strong currents. Yet the effort to get there only heightens its mystique. Travelers find themselves arriving on a small, windswept island where the land feels close to myth, an outpost overlooking a vast expanse of ocean. Beneath its waters waits not only marine life and coral reefs but the shadowy steps of a structure that has captured imaginations worldwide. For those who descend into the waters, exploration is both exhilarating and dangerous. The currents around Yonaguni are known for their strength, pulling divers with unexpected force, at times sweeping them hundreds of meters from their intended path. Even the most skilled divers must respect the sea, planning their trips with precision, accompanied by experienced guides who know how to navigate the swirling water. This danger lends an atmosphere of intensity to every visit. To stand before the monument is therefore not a casual act, it is an achievement, one that marks the diver with the sense of having reached a frontier. Divers describe the experience in ways that evoke reverence rather than simple adventure. Some compare it to swimming through the ruins of an ancient temple, others describe it as drifting through the hallways of a forgotten palace. The stone steps and plazas provoke awe in ways that are difficult to put into words. The silence of the underwater world, broken only by the steady rhythm of breath through a regulator, adds to this atmosphere of solemnity. What might seem simply rock from a photograph becomes intensely alive in person, charged with presence and an unsettling sense of order. Photographers and filmmakers carry this presence back to the surface. It was through images and later documentaries that the monument first reached the wider world. The sharp edges of terraces, the pyramid-like forms, the broad platforms all captured on camera invited millions to gaze upon the debate with their own eyes. Broadcasts introduced the monument to audiences far from Japan, framing it alternately as a geological marvel, a possible ruin, or the Pacific's version of Atlantis. Each portrayal shaped the monument differently, but all reinforced its reputation as one of the great unsolved mysteries beneath the waves. Researchers have continued to study the site, though conditions make thorough exploration difficult. Strong currents limit the time divers can spend taking measurements. Sediment and coral obscure fine details. Equipment malfunctions in the saltwater, and deploying submarines or scanning technologies is costly and dangerous. Yet still, expeditions are organized, each seeking clearer maps, more detailed photographs, or physical samples that might clarify the monument's story. Despite decades of effort, no conclusive proof has tipped the scales toward either natural or man-made origin. The site remains as elusive in evidence as it is striking in imagery. Exploration of Yonaguni has also illuminated the way humans respond to the unknown. Divers often remark that even skeptical scientists, once descending into the presence of the terraces, cannot help but feel unsure, caught between recognition of natural processes and the undeniable resemblance to monuments of human architecture. The mind holds both realities at once, shifting between geology and archaeology as though carried by the tide itself. This dissonance is part of the site's enduring allure. One cannot observe it without experiencing a collapse of certainty, a recognition that human imagination thrives where evidence ends. Over time, Yonaguni has become not only a scientific site but a cultural destination. Dive tours advertise journeys into mystery, drawing visitors from across the world. For some, the trip is fueled by scientific interest; for others, it is more spiritual, a pilgrimage to an underwater temple that speaks to something eternal. Photographers frame the monument as art, capturing elegant plays of light and shadow across the geometry of stone, creating images that look both alien and strangely familiar. Each diver brings back their own story, each photograph adds to the collective memory, each documentary expands the fascination. Exploring the monument also brings people into closer connection with the ocean itself. While seeking answers about the terraces, divers cannot help but notice the teeming marine life around them. Schools of fish weave through stone corridors. Sharks, graceful and silent, move along the edges of the monument. Coral attaches itself to flat surfaces, covering geometric lines in a riot of organic growth. This juxtaposition of sharp stone geometry and the fluid life of the ocean intensifies the sense of otherworldly beauty. It seems as though the monument does not belong only to its possible builders or to geology, but to the sea itself, which has reclaimed it utterly. The monument's presence in modern storytelling cannot be overstated. It has appeared in documentaries, speculative books, television specials, and online debates. For each person who dives in physically, countless more explore it vicariously through these portrayals. Writers tie the site into broader myths of Atlantis, Lemuria, and Mu, casting Yonaguni as evidence of forgotten continents erased from world maps. Scientists counter by insisting the site is a natural wonder instead of a cultural ruin. This ongoing dialogue keeps Yonaguni alive within the public imagination, an enigma not resolved but perpetually retold. The experience of exploring Yonaguni is not simply about seeking facts but about immersing oneself in uncertainty. Divers return with data, yes, but also with feelings of insignificance, awe, humility, and often an unshakable haunting impression that something lingers in the stones beyond geology. To explore it is to stand at the very crossroads of nature, myth, and history, to descend into an arena where questions are endless and answers remain withheld. That is why exploration never truly ends at Yonaguni. Every diver who experiences it becomes part of an ongoing tradition of wonder. On the island above, locals have grown accustomed to the curious faces who arrive each year to board boats bound for the diving site. They speak with quiet pride of the attention Yonaguni has brought, though they remain cautious in declaring it the work of ancient humans. For them, it is simply part of their ocean, a place intertwined with myth stretching back generations. To others, it is a site with global importance, potentially rewriting what we know of human history. For both locals and visitors, however, it has become impossible to deny that the monument possesses a spell that cannot easily be broken. Perhaps the greatest achievement of exploration has been to make Yonaguni visible. Where once the terraces lay unknown, known only to fish and passing tides, now human eyes have seen, studied, and recorded them. The monument has joined the long list of global mysteries that define not only regions but the human spirit itself, alongside the pyramids, Stonehenge, and Easter Island. Unlike those others, however, it remains submerged, half-hidden and silent, reminding us that discovery is often partial, that mysteries endure not because we fail to explore them but because their nature resists resolution. Yonaguni teaches us that exploration is a process without final answers, a journey made meaningful simply by the willingness to ask and to seek. And so the divers continue. Descending year after year, some find new details where others see only repetition. Each journey adds another layer of testimony, another interpretation of the shape, another photograph that sparks debate. Like explorers of old who charted unknown seas and filled in the blank spaces on maps, today's divers sketch outlines of terraces, stairs, and plazas. Yet their maps remain incomplete, their certainty suspended. The true essence of Yonaguni lies not in the resolution of exploration but in its perpetual call, a call to descend, to risk, to wonder. To watch a diver rise again to the surface of Yonaguni, mask lifted, eyes wide with both exhaustion and exhilaration, is to see the meaning of the sight reflected in human expression. It is the meaning of the sudden realization that even with all our science, with all our maps and histories, immense mysteries remain. Exploration transforms us, not by solving puzzles but by teaching us we have only scratched the surface. Yonaguni, resting quietly below, continues to prove that truth is often neighbor to mystery, and that to explore is not to conquer knowledge but to learn humility in the vastness of what remains unknown. The debate surrounding the Yonaguni Monument has always lived in a delicate balance, swinging gently between science and mystery. For every explanation that situates the formation neatly within the realm of geology, there emerges another observation that pulls it back toward human possibility. This tension is not a flaw of the site but its greatest gift, for it places visitors and scholars alike within the realm of uncertainty. We are forced not to accept a single truth but to live within a spectrum of possibilities, where stone becomes more than stone, where time and imagination collide in the shadows beneath the water. Scientists maintain their careful voices, emphasizing that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. They point to the fractured sandstone, the tectonic stresses of the region, the erosional forces that could plausibly create terraces, steps, and platforms. They remind us that humans are adept at perceiving patterns even where none exist, a cognitive bias known as pareidolia, which makes faces appear in mountains or animals emerge from clouds. At Yonaguni, this bias is amplified by the scale of the structures, compelling divers to see architecture where nature alone may be at work. Yet those who have seen the monument firsthand often find it difficult to leave convinced of one simple explanation. Photographs, even detailed ones, fail to reproduce the impact of physical presence. Standing before the immense steps of stone, the human body feels dwarfed, the sense of geometry impossible to ignore. It is not merely the appearance of order that unsettles the mind but the feeling of being in a constructed environment, as though the ocean floor itself holds rooms, courtyards, and staircases. Even skeptics recognize the psychological power of the place. They may hold firm to the geological case, but they acknowledge that Yonaguni refuses to feel ordinary. This refusal to conform keeps the mystery alive. The scientific community thrives upon certainty, but Yonaguni resists categorization, dwelling at the very edge of what geology and archaeology can conclusively prove. Some embrace this resistance as an invitation to wonder, a reminder that not every part of the Earth demands immediate explanation. Others see it as a source of frustration, a riddle interrupting the neat order of history. Between these reactions lies the monument's true strength, for in never offering a final answer, it perpetually generates curiosity, debate, and reflection. Over the years, opposing camps have produced competing narratives. Geologists see the site as an opportunity to demonstrate the artistry of natural forces, using Yonaguni as a classroom where the processes of tectonic activity, erosion, and sedimentary fracture are vividly on display. Archaeologists sympathetic to the opposite view call it proof, perhaps the only proof, of an ancient chapter erased by rising seas, urging peers not to dismiss what might be humanity's earliest large-scale creation. These stories overlap without resolving, creating not clarity but a layered dialogue in which both voices remain loud, neither silenced by final certainty. The broader public, caught between these positions, often gravitates to the mystery itself. For many, the fascination is not diminished by doubt but amplified by it. A mystery explained loses some of its majesty, but a mystery preserved continues to shine like a lantern in the dark. Documentaries, articles, and discussions frame the site not as a conclusion but as a question. Is Yonaguni man-made? Is it natural? Does it dwell somewhere in between? Each retelling fuels the mystique, ensuring that the monument remains vivid not because of what we know, but precisely because of what we do not. In this sense, Yonaguni has transcended categories. It is no longer confined strictly to geology or archaeology but exists in the liminal space between both, belonging equally to science and imagination. It serves as a reminder that our pursuit of knowledge often circles around mysteries larger than our capacity to resolve them. Like Stonehenge or the Great Pyramid, it draws strength from ambiguity. People are drawn to what confounds them, and Yonaguni is resilient in its ability to confound. The ocean guards it carefully, wrapping it in silence, slowing every attempt to pin it to a single truth. This tension is also reflected in the way divers and academics speak about the site. Divers, moved by direct experience, often adopt reverent tones, describing Yonaguni in the language of awe and wonder. Academics, careful to separate evidence from feeling, adopt technical voices that fracture the mystery into angles, planes, and stress lines. Yet their words cannot erase the reality that even scientific language is not immune to metaphor. Researchers speak of steps, walls, plazas, terms borrowed from human architecture. In doing so, even skeptics unknowingly grant the monument an aura of design, proving how inseparable the site is from human imagination. To occupy this space between science and mystery is to confront the limits of knowledge itself. Yonaguni suggests that the line between natural and human-made is not always clean, and perhaps never has been. Humans build with stone, yes, but they also find shapes within stone and adapt them to their needs. Nature shapes landforms according to its laws, but those shapes often mirror the structures we ourselves create. The monument embodies this overlap. Whether by accident or intention, it stands in the space between builder and earth, reminding us that certainty is only part of truth, and mystery is the rest. In this dialogue between perspectives, time itself plays a crucial role. The ocean has had thousands of years to reshape whatever once stood upon that seabed. Waves have washed across it, currents have sharpened its edges, storms have hammered its surfaces. The monument we see now may not be identical to the one that stood as the seas first rose. Perhaps traces of more obvious human work have been erased. Perhaps what was once chaotic stone has become more orderly. The hands of nature and time move together, blurring whatever lines might once have been crisp. This possibility ensures that neither camp can claim victory in interpretation, for the monument no longer speaks with a single voice. The fascination with Yonaguni is sustained not simply by stones but by the human mind's refusal to leave them alone. It is not unusual for geology to create shapes resembling human architecture. What is unusual is how insistently those shapes refuse dismissal here. The scale, the precision, the atmosphere all combine to compel engagement. Even if geology is correct, Yonaguni functions as though it were a temple, drawing reverence by virtue of its form alone. The experience of wonder is real, regardless of whether humans carved the stone or nature fractured it. Thus, the site is both real and symbolic, actual stone but also metaphor, teaching us that explanation is not the only measure of power. Between science and mystery, Yonaguni stands as a reflection of humanity itself. We are creatures that crave certainty yet thrive on curiosity, beings that want answers but treasure questions. The monument gives us both. It offers enough clues to invite science, enough ambiguity to provoke story. It straddles the divide between known and unknown, showing us that wonder does not require resolution. For the diver, the scientist, the dreamer, it becomes all things at once: classroom, temple, riddle, reminder. And in that balance, its strangeness is secure. The monument continues to wait beneath the sea, content to inspire without explaining, to hypnotize without clarifying. To enter its waters is to enter that balance, moving through columns of light and shadow, feeling order and chaos entwined in stone. To speak of Yonaguni is to speak not only of rock but of ourselves, of the strange human appetite to push against the horizon of the known and then step willingly into the embrace of enduring mystery. Beneath the restless waters of Yonaguni, the monument continues to sleep in quiet silence, its massive terraces shrouded in currents and shadow. Whether it is the masterpiece of geological chance or the work of forgotten ancestors who carved meaning into the stone, it has become something more than either possibility. It has become a symbol of mystery, of time, of the human longing to understand and the acceptance that some things linger forever beyond our grasp. As we close our journey, the image remains: steps descending into darkness, corridors leading to nowhere, plazas waiting for ceremonies that may never have existed. Stone lies heavy in the sea's embrace, worn yet enduring, like a riddle carved thousands of years ago and preserved by the ocean's patient hand. Above it, the sound of waves breaking upon the island whispers questions that carry into the night without answer. Standing at the meeting point of ocean and myth, the monument tells us something about ourselves. We are beings who hunger for stories, who gaze upon stone and stitch it into meaning, who refuse to let mystery rest untouched. Perhaps Yonaguni was never a city, never a shrine, never shaped by anything but fracture and tide. Yet to us, it has become all of those things, because we need it to be, because imagination builds where certainty dissolves. It may be that human hands never touched Yonaguni's terraces, but that does not lessen its power. The sheer scale and geometry summon the same emotions as the pyramids or the temples of the ancient world. The awe does not diminish when geology explains its origins. The awe magnifies, for we see in it the majesty of Earth itself, the vast artistry of nature's blind hand creating monuments more enduring than any empire. And yet if even one corner of the monument was touched by human hands, if even one ledge was shaped with mortal intention, then it is older than all our empires, a shadowed memory of a civilization erased. To accept this possibility is to rewrite history, to admit that humanity may have been building long before history says we could build. In either possibility, whether natural wonder or ancient handiwork, the monument stands as a wonder worthy of reverence. Time itself seems to linger differently here. 10,000 years of rising seas, storms, erosion, and shifting currents have failed to erase Yonaguni. It reminds us that history is never truly gone, only hidden, only submerged until chance reveals it. When divers swim across its terraces, they touch not just stone but time itself, their bodies suspended in history's deep ocean, carried between memory and silence. Those who surface from Yonaguni rarely emerge unchanged. They speak of the monument not in precise measurements or charts, but in reverent tones, as though describing something sacred. Their words are filled with feeling respect for the ocean, wonder for the stone, humility for the mystery that resists their questions. Science may never close this case fully, but perhaps that is not failure. Perhaps it is gift, reminding us that human life thrives on wonder as much as on proof. In the end, the Yonaguni Monument does not need to prove its identity. Whether accident of nature or creation of an ancient people, it already fulfills its role. It awakens imagination, inspires stories, fuels debate, and humbles those who gaze upon it. Its true secret may not be in the answer to the question "what is it?" but in the reminder that not every question requires resolution. Some exist to keep us searching, to keep us curious, to remind us how much lies undiscovered beneath the horizons of our world. And so, dear listener, as we surface from this journey, let us leave Yonaguni where it rests in mystery, in silence, in dignity beneath the waves. You have drifted with me across its terraces, wandered through its plazas, listened to legends and science entwined. You have heard voices of doubt and voices of faith, felt the ocean's steady current wash between possibility and proof. Let this monument remain with you, not as an answer, but as an invitation, a reminder that wonder is eternal. Thank you for joining me in this exploration of one of the world's most haunting enigmas, the monument that rests at the edge of Japan, half temple, half stone, entirely mysterious. May its silence guide you to peace tonight, allowing your thoughts to drift as gently as currents around Yonaguni's steps. May sleep find you as calm as the waters over its terraces, as steady as the centuries it has endured, as endless as the mystery it continues to hold. Good night, and may your dreams, like Yonaguni, be filled with wonder.